All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm Dr. Sinicropibreaks, your friendly orthopedic spine surgeon host. We're on AM 950 radio, and today we're going to try to cut through some of the noise for those of you that are out here really trying to be CEOs of your health and trying to get information. Now, we'll start it this way, and then on the other side, we'll get into the different topics. So, you know, there is so much available right now on the internet and social media and from wherever you're hearing things from friends and family when it comes to longevity, wellness, all these different, things that are out here, all these hot topics, quote unquote. Unfortunately, I would say that if I had to estimate, at least half, if not 70% of what you guys are hearing is not accurate. Now, on the, the good news is that we are having some really deep and important conversations that were not had before. I hear people, just randomly in, if I go to Target or something like that, I overhear people talking about peptides or talking about GLP1’s and weight loss drugs and things of that nature. And you know what? These conversations weren't being had just 5-10 years ago. And so people are trying to strategize. They're trying to look at ways to really make themselves more healthy and get right. The problem is with all of these things, including stem cells and longevity drugs and, what medicines people should be taking to live longer and healthier, is that a lot of who is out here talking about it has either not the credentials to be really discussing these topics. And when I say credentials, I mean, it takes a lot of deep and intense studying to understand these things, but you also have to know kind of what happens in the entire overall body system to understand how some of these modalities are just going to affect the entire, human body, so to speak. And so just saying, hey, take this, it is a wonder, and you're gonna grow wings and be able to, to fly around is, unfortunately, we hear a lot of it. So a lot of people are just excited. And so they'll Google things, they'll read things one time. Most people don't even get into papers. I mean, we just had this debate the other day with another this really brilliant doctor that I was talking to. And we were just saying that people just don't even read papers anymore. We're lucky if they even read the synopsis of it, the introduction. And so people are not really reading, but they're excited, and so they're getting things out. The other, category of people that are out here, unfortunately, are people that have something to gain from it. So it's all these influencers, all these people that are selling peptides, or they're selling some longevity cream, or they're telling you to do this or that. Again, exciting that people are talking about these topics, but the downside is that if everything is about what code they're going to give you to go ahead and buy some unregistered, peptide that's coming from who knows where, this is not really in your best interest, and there's a lot of serious side effects that can happen with some of these things. We need to be out here educating you guys on what is possible. There are so many exciting things going on in health, wellness, and longevity, and that's really my role, a role I've taken on between the book and the podcast and the radio show and all the things that we are doing. So on the other side of the break, I really want to focus on really 5 different buckets, and we'll get through them. Each of them could be their own show. Things that are very hot topics right now. The first is peptides. Okay, then I'm going to separate, even though GLP1s are generally, are peptides. There's newer stuff as well, but I'm going to separate that out because weight loss drugs, we'll separate that out from some of the other peptides we're talking about. We're going to talk about stem cells, exosomes, acellular signaling molecules. We're going to talk about some of the longevity drugs, and then I want to talk about epigenetic testing. These things are really, really important to talk about. We're going to talk what's fact, what's myth. usually things are somewhere in between, and we'll see kind of how that all ends up. But really trying to help you guys to be the CEOs of your own health. You need real information from people that have the credentials to provide it to you. So we'll see you on the other side. Recharging the Human Battery Radio, AM 950. This is Dr. Sinicropibreaks. See you in a minute. All right, Dr. Sinicropibreaks back. We are on Recharging the Human Battery Radio. This is AM 950, and we're talking longevity, wellness, facts and myths out here, and really trying to help you guys really be able to take control of your own health and make the right decisions. Because like I said, you guys know how excited I am. The advancements that have happened really over the last 10 years on what we are finding out, both between clinical trials and experience of so many doctors out here that are really going back to first principles, which is going back to us being healers, not just technicians, and looking to see how can we keep people healthy and well instead of focusing on how can we treat people once they get sick. This is really the basics. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. The problem, like I said, on the other side of the break is there are just so many myths and just so many people saying different things. I mean, literally, you could go on your Instagram feed right now and you could just type in the word peptide and you'll just start seeing a barrage of different information, and unfortunately, a lot of it is going to be misinformation or people just trying to sell you some quick fix. It's much, much more complicated than that. I'm really excited about some upcoming events that we have where we're really going to be breaking down the science of peptides, the science of regenerative medicine, and really how does it work and what's the truth behind it? What does the evidence show? What are the, what do the trials show, et cetera? And then we can make a decision. But I'll tell you, like this week, if you think about it, if you guys are into this stuff and you have it on your feeds or you've been Googling stuff, I'm sure somebody told you that a peptide was going to heal your knee overnight because they took it and it was a miracle. Somebody told you that, that you have one stem cell treatment and you're going to be, 15 years younger, automatically. Somebody told you they're going to swab your cheek and they're going to tell you in a few days, how fast you're actually aging, or you could talk about like things like some of these longevity pills, which we'll get into just a little bit. That'll tell you, yeah, you're definitely going to live to 110. The problem is there is no evidence behind a lot of these things, and we have to be really careful about separating the good and the bad. Now, I think that all the categories we talk about today, there is tremendous potential. And yes, I am someone that looks at what are the possible risks of doing some of these things. If the risks are low, I think that it is okay, especially within a doctor-patient, environment to, push the envelope somewhat. Again, when safety profiles are really good. If there are risks involved, then I think that and significant risks, I think that these things really have to be, decided, in clinical trials and things like that. So on that note, let's get into it. My job today, really, I'm not trying to sell you hope. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I do want you to be hopeful because there is a lot to be hopeful about. So let's get into it. So the biggest, thing right now that is really a hot trending topic, especially because we are, coming up on the Federal Advisory Committee voting July 23rd and July 24th of this year on bringing peptides from basically the category 2, where compounding pharmacies can't technically legally make them, back to category 1. Now, if you've heard, folks, and again, you guys know I am not political when it comes to any of these things, but you see the different factions out here. There are many members of the FDA that are fairly against this. There's an entire other wing of longevity medicine specialists, and then people like RFK and others that are extremely pro getting these peptides back into the category 1 list. Now, what are the peptides on the table? They're BPC 157, TB 500, MOTS C, DSIP, Semax, and Epitalon. They all have lots and lots of preclinical data. There's no question that these peptides have preclinical data. Now, if you look at peptides like Semax is what's called a nootropic. It actually can enhance your brain function. And you look at Epitalon, which is more of a longevity medicine peptide. Interestingly, there are more clinical studies, but because they were performed in Russia, people are a lot more wary of that. But if you do look at the Epitalon studies, by the way, Epitalon is something that is basically involved in circadian rhythms, production of melatonin. It's something that was found in the pineal gland. And it's very interesting. But if you look at the Russian studies on it, I mean, it's extraordinarily interesting and positive. But again, what are the real studies that have been done? So the honest problem is that we are missing a lot of rigorous, controlled human trial data on these peptides, and it is something that is a hotly debated topic. Now, I can tell you when I post something on, if I post something on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and I'm just trying to basically educate people, immediately there are those that are going to come in upset both ways. So on one hand, they'll say, I can't believe that you're doubting this. We as longevity doctors, we've been using this for, 5 years, for 10 years. Our patients are doing amazing. We have all these people on there saying, oh my God, it changed my life, this and that. And then there's the other side of the coin that are like, oh my God, any doctor or provider that provides these for their patients is committing harm and this and that. I think that I'm going to take a balanced approach. And I say that, and to be honest with you, I get into debates on both sides with these people, because on the one hand, we cannot talk about things that are like these miracle cures and it's going to do all this stuff and it's the greatest and there's no risks and on and on. So I'll get into debates with those people. But on the other hand, people that are really criticizing very heavily and just saying that people are, going against, the principles of doing no harm, I have to push back on them, because if you look at the smaller trials that have been done, or papers, sometimes I won't even call them trials, but if you look at anecdotal data, you look at longevity medicine physicians and other doctors that have been prescribing these peptides for a long, long time, they're not really seeing massive side effects with these things. And so if it is helping their patients, why would you not try that when we don't have necessarily other tools to be able to get those specific effects? Now, another debate that I often have with my colleagues is the fact that without question, there are a lot of pharmacology, things that we prescribe to people that are they're FDA approved, big pharma's all behind them, that have very significant side effects. And comparing them with the side effects, potential side effects of peptides, is something that I think that we need to do. And I think it's a legitimate discussion. And the fact that if you look at some of the studies that have been done with peptides, like for example, like a KPV peptide, which is on that list. Now, KPV is kind of the peptide equivalent of an anti-inflammatory. And if you look when they did studies in autoimmune disease of the gut, the thing that was most glaring in those studies was the safety profile was excellent. And so you guys know the deal. Some of the pharmacology that we prescribe, including myself, I have to prescribe certain drugs with certain diseases. They have very serious side effects. So it's really, really critical to differentiate. So I just want you to get a flavor and understand you have to take a balanced approach. And that's why when it comes to thinking about doing peptides or any of the other things we're going to talk about today, you should absolutely do it in conjunction with a provider that can absolutely guide you on that path, that can monitor your labs, that can monitor how you're doing, that can make sure you're not having toxicity, somebody that's available there for you to help you, but also to understand how it's going to affect other medications you may be on, how it affects you if you have certain conditions, etc. It is so much better to do that. Now, the other really overwhelming thing that I want to get out on this when it comes to the peptide landscape tape is this. There are dangers for sure for not having FDA approved pharmacies, okay, not FDA approved peptides. I'm just talking about legal compounding pharmacies making it, because you can get endotoxins, you can have products that don't even have the peptide in it. There's just a lot of things out there. This is also hotly debated. It's something that sometimes I can't even bring it up, because those that believe in just getting peptides from any online source, and that's fantastic, they get upset, and you know what happens on the flip side. So as we get into this, huge debate at the FDA on whether or not these peptides are going to move to Schedule 1, the bottom line is there's the optimist and the skeptimist, and honestly, it's somewhere in between. I strongly believe that if these are allowed to be done through compounding pharmacies and done under supervision of physicians that have some peptides online that have really nothing at stake, like what's going to happen to them? Nothing. If, physicians have, their boards, they have their medical licenses, they have all kinds of stuff to risk. And I think that also the other thing I'll say is that as a group of people that do believe in longevity medicines and peptides and things like that, I think that we need to pool our internal data that we're seeing from our own patients to at least put together some studies that can absolutely show at least the safety profiles on a much larger basis, but also show efficacy. So again, this is coming up. By the time we know this, people will have been hotly contesting. By the time you guys hear this, the hearings might have already happened, and I can tell you there's going to be a huge fight. It's very interesting. I wish I had that answer for you today. We'll talk about it the next time I'm on air. We'll talk about which way it went, but I think it's really interesting. So I'll finish this with peptides. I give peptides a huge green light. The science is very powerful, okay? So the science is powerful. That doesn't mean I'm giving a green light to people to just, willy-nilly be on peptides. I think you have to do it with a provider. You have to be very judicious. And a lot of times peptides are not even necessary. So be careful. When it comes to the, efficacy, I'll give it a yellow light because we don't yet have the human trials exactly to promise outcomes. But obviously, anecdotally, and what some of these smaller studies, definitely there has been some good improvement. So my rule for patients, if you use them, do it through a licensed pharmacy with a physician guiding you, or, or get into, a trial, not off of websites that also sell you cryptocurrency and all kinds of, codes and things like that. That is where that's where we're going. We'll see what the FDA shows. This is going to be a debate that goes on for quite a long time. Okay, let's get into the next thing. Now, this one is pretty easy. So the weight loss drugs. So let's just talk about, so there's the GLP1's, but now there's all kinds of other, breakthroughs going on. So the semaglutides and the tirzepatides of the world. Now we're really getting into like retatrutide and all the next generation drugs, which have like really, tremendous data to back them. Now, I will tell you, there are downsides to them, but let's talk about like what the trials show. I will tell you that initially, because people were so overwhelmingly positive on these GLP-1 drugs, I would be in my car and I'm listening to CNBC and everybody's like, oh my God, GLP-1's this and that. It just seemed like it was a little bit over the top. So initially, I really was asking a lot of questions. I was really not particularly comfortable, back in those times, really taking a stand one way or another on GLP-1's, just because I was just hearing too much from Big Pharma, too much excitement. People, they were parading person after person out here to say how great these things were. But over time, the science has absolutely shown that there are significant benefits to these drug classes, with the caveat that you can certainly have significant issues happen. Let me just talk about 3 trials. There's something called the SELECT trial that looked at 17,000 adults across 41 countries that did not have diabetes. It cut major cardiovascular event risks down. and that happened even before they had major weight loss. That's started to suggest the direct cardiovascular effects. There's something called the FLOW trial that was semaglutide in type 2 diabetes, which is used quite a bit. But in that trial, people also had chronic kidney disease. Over 3.4 years, there was a 24% reduction in serious kidney outcomes and 20% lower all-cause mortality. I will say that that's pretty good, having read a ton of studies in the longevity space. And now you have the Summit trial in 2025. That was the tirzepatide trial. It reduced the combined risk of cardiovascular death or worsening a heart failure by 38%. Okay, in people that had heart failure, a condition that's really tied to obesity and aging, and the treatments for, heart failure aren't fantastic. And so having something that is a compound that can do that. So there have been other analyses, and they clearly show that this class of drugs can, and I didn't even get into like the amount of weight loss and things like that. We'll get there, but this class of drugs can reduce heart attack, stroke, and death from any cause. That's pretty good. This is tier 1 evidence. So this is randomized controlled trials. It really is hard to dispute these. Weight loss has ranged from anywhere like in the low teens to now getting into the 20s with the newer classes of drugs, even with the oral pills now. So it is just a fascinating science. We have a massive obesity problem in this country. We have a huge cardiovascular problem. We have so many issues with chronic disease. So I'm all for things that can cut down chronic disease. Now let's talk about the downsides, because and we can get into a lot of them, but one of the big ones that you guys have heard about is that rapid weight loss, you're also losing lean body mass. So it's very important to have ways to increase protein intake, to increase resistance training, and there's also devices, there's supplements, there's all kinds of things. We can do that another time, but that's why you need to work with a qualified provider that really understands this, because if you develop a condition called sarcopenia, which is a loss of a lot of your muscle, you're much more at risk for death in general. But anything that happens to you, if you have a surgery, if you have a fracture, if you have anything, it's going to be a worse outcome. There are other things. There are GI issues now. These drugs act both on the GI tract and on the brain, but it can cause issues with things like gastric emptying, and there have been cases where it doesn't come back. It's called gastroparesis, or paralysis of the stomach. It is a huge thing. Now, most of the times it's reversible, but there are, reports where, it has been a big problem. The next big one is the rapid regain in weight when you come off of these. This has been really well studied. It is a concern to see what happens down the road as people are on these things for a long time, where we end up being. But we have to be very cognizant of the rapid, weight gain after this. And then the last one I'll talk about, and there's actually more than this, but one of them is a changing, a blunting in the effect. And so some people will notice that people that are on these really have a blunted affect. They're not, they're not the same energetic person. They have a flat affect. They become different. Now, most of the people that experience that, again, a lot of that stuff is reversible, but there still is concern that in some people it can definitely change our personalities and make us more apathetic to many different things, which is one of the ways that that the drug works. So we have to be really, really careful. We're going to continue studying this. There's so much. There are billions and billions of dollars put into the science of these weight loss drugs. And so I will tell you this, I'm going to give this a big green light as far as cardiovascular health, kidney health, heart failure benefits. It is absolutely the real deal. Where we wave the yellow flag and have to be really careful of. We talked about the mood stuff. We talked about the loss of muscle. Again, the prescription is just one of the protocols, but there's so much more that goes into it. Resistance training, making sure that you're having adequate protein intake, things to block the breakdown of muscle and so on. But bottom line is, you should absolutely be doing this along with a qualified provider that can really help to take you and guide you on your journey, because those that are doing it with the qualified providers are going to generally have better outcomes because they're going with professional experience, and they are understanding that if you do develop complications or problems with it, that they can help guide you, and they can also recognize when things are going the wrong way and make the appropriate changes. So GLP-1s and the newer weight loss drugs, yes, absolutely. I think it has made a huge impact, but we still have to be very careful with some of the side effects. Okay, next, something near and dear to my heart, something I'm very passionate about. I speak about a lot. I'll be speaking on this topic quite a bit, and that is really the world of stem cells and regenerative medicine. I gave a TED Talk last year here in Minneapolis specifically on stem cells and the spine, which has some really good developing data, and we've certainly seen phenomenal outcomes at the Institute for Regenerative Medicine here in Edina, Minnesota. But there is so much to discuss when it comes to the stem cell world and what's possible out here. So when we're talking about regenerative medicine, it's a very broad, category. So, some of the peptides we could even put in a regenerative medicine category, like a BPC 157 or like a KPV, things that really kind of create healing. But in general, when we talk about regenerative medicine, there's two things we're talking about. We're talking about the stem cells, okay? And then we're talking about the signaling molecules that the stem cells produce. So generally, when we talk about stem cells, we're talking about something called mesenchymal stem cells, adult mesenchymal stem cells. So once a baby is born, the second it's born, those stem cells are considered adult stem cells. And this is oftentimes a source of people, being confused. So when these stem cells, okay, should really be called medicinal signaling cells, because it's all about how they signal. So if you put stem cells in the body, they can create these signaling molecules, which then do wonders in the body by training the immune system, signaling other stem cells, signaling the repair process, and so on. Now, on the other side, there's all the signaling molecules. Okay, you guys have probably heard of the word exosomes. They're these tiny vesicles that the cells signal, to heal each other. But there's all these regenerative protein arrays that are around these stem cells, these signaling molecules, the signal itself. And so we can actually harvest the signals themselves around these mesenchymal stem cells and deliver the signals themselves. And those are products that, for example, we use in our clinic, something called regenerative protein array by a company called Genesis Regenerative, which has a phenomenal, track record as far as, science and being above board, and deliver these for different, reasons. And so in the United States, there are very specific rules for the stem cells we can use. Now, when we talk about your own body's stem cells, where we take them out of your body and put them back in, which has phenomenal data in the orthopedic world and in the spine world, etc., that is completely fine. That's above board. When we take cells and replicate them, that is what there is a lot of consternation on, and the laws need to change before we go in that path, even though states like Florida have made some changes in the laws. When it comes to these other products that are outside, there's different ways that they are categorized. I'm not going to get into all of it because it is very, very very, very complicated. The bottom line is there is a bunch of biologics out here, some of which, are getting, some FDA enforcement, some of which are not. But we just have to be really careful as providers to use things that have good scientific evidence behind them, have great safety profiles, and then we can give options to patients which can make a massive impact and a difference. And so just going back to what I said before, you can take the stem cells, basically from your own body, we can implant it into an area. So, for example, if you have knee arthritis, we can take your own stem cells from your bone marrow and put them underneath the cartilage. That has been shown to reduce the incidence of needing a total knee replacement down from about 70 to 80% down to about 20% at 15 years. That's so dramatic. These are things that we don't talk about enough. That has a potential to help a lot of people to avoid knee replacement. There's good studies in the shoulder. There's good studies in the hip. There's good studies in the spine. I can go on. Now, stem cells are being used. Now, that is actually using like the actual stem cells, usually from our own bodies. Now, if you go overseas, you can certainly get a ton of replicated stem cells that come from the placenta, etc. I think that there are some issues with that because you're getting foreign DNA, so there is potential for some reactions. But having had, for example, Neil Riordan, the founder of the Panama Stem Cell Clinic, on my show, I mean, they've treated over 30,000 patients with very, very little downside side effects. And so generally, it's thought to be safe. Again, this is not something that we would do here yet in the United States. Here's the good news, though, is you can also harvest those regenerative protein arrays outside of the stem cells. And so let's talk about the placenta. So when we are born, there's something called the placenta. We're in the placenta. So these very powerful stem cells that are in the placenta really help the baby to grow and to develop. They're very powerful signaling molecules. And so they are producing like a tremendous amount of signaling molecules. Those signaling molecules can be harvested, and those can be delivered within acellular products like regenerative protein array to give very rapid delivery of the signal to our tissues, to our other cells, and tell them to initiate the healing process. And so these are the two options. I can tell you in clinical practice, we have had excellent results with stem cell treatments. There are so many people that are seeking stem cell treatments. There are a countless number of professional athletes, A-listers, just people that are in the know that are seeking stem cell treatments, and they're a lot more economical than you would think, especially if you come up here to the Midwest, as the pricing up here is generally very reasonable. So let's just kind of tie this all up, because again, that's an entire other talk, and I know I've talked about stem cells before. There's a massive surge in people wanting to know about stem cells, exosome signaling molecules, etc. In fact, it in the last year, it's the demand for consumer interest is up almost 600%. It's very, very rapid, and it probably is outpacing the evidence. If you look at just the exosome market, that's exploding from like 50 billion to 300 billion. But we have to be really careful because it's the Wild West. And so again, you guys need to go to people that you can trust to deliver any products or stem cells or whatever in a way that is very safe, is in the best interest of the patient, is not some kind of a sales pitch or a money grab, but is really based on trying to get your guys' health improved and get you to a place. Because if you're in a ton of pain, for example, if you have knee arthritis or if you have these other conditions, if you have a neurologic disorder, stem cells and signaling molecules can be used there. Again, I'll go into it on another episode. However, the potential for stem cells and regenerative medicine is so gigantic that it is something I'm going to continue to talk about, and I'll be basically speaking all over the country on the potential they have. So, please come and check out one of our events if you have the opportunity. All right, I'm going to go quickly through these next two. There's a drug called rapamycin. It is actually something that is a longevity drug, and if you guys know Brian Johnson, he's talked about that a lot. And there are so many different people out here just talking about these things. This is not something that is in any way readily available. It just has a lot of hoopla. So, there's something called the Pearl study. It was published in 2025. It was a double-blind, placebo-controlled healthy adults, 50 to 85 years old. They got 5 or 10 milligrams of this drug. And unfortunately, the headline was kind of buried in the internet that the primary endpoint, which was visceral fat reduction, really was not met. It was relatively safe. The adverse events were no different than basically placebo or the sugar pill. And there was some improvement in lean tissue mass and pain, especially in women. But again, it did not give these results that were expected, where it was going to dramatically delay aging in healthy older adults. It's plain and simple. We need to keep looking at this. I can tell you, there's other things coming down the pipeline that have more evidence and are really going to really help us. In fact, there was an injection of one of these molecules recently into the eye to reverse blinding. It is the first of its kind to reverse aging. And I think that the results of that study are going to be fascinating, because if that's positive, then we are really headed into another era. Last thing I'll say on the longevity piece and these longevity drugs, again, that one was somewhat disappointing. However, I will tell you that the advances that are coming now, if you guys can hold on for the next 5 or 10 years and keep yourselves healthy and do all the things that we talk about really constantly, we are going to hit escape velocity, where humans, I strongly believe, are going to be able to live to 120, 130, 140 years old, if you can just hang on for a while and keep your body relatively, healthy. So we'll talk about longevity drugs as the evidence continues, to come in. All right, the last one, something I'm very, very passionate about, is something called epigenetic testing and looking at biological age. So the real question is, are these epigenetic tests, these clocks, is it really a window into how fast they're aging? And does it allow us to really make the correct interventions? Okay, so let's talk about epigenetics. Epigenetics means above genetics. We have a set amount of genes that are absolutely fixed. No matter what we do, they're going to express, they're going to do what they're going to do. It's debatable what that is. You could put it in the 20 to 40% range. That means that 60 to 80% of our genes are turned on and turned off depending on our exposure, our environmental exposure, our experience, what is going on in their lives. And so if we have very poor lifestyles, we're turning on the wrong genes and turning off the right ones. And you can flip that if we are leading great lifestyles and really taking care of our health. So when we look at the actual epigenetic, these clocks where it says, hey, how fast are we aging? And I'll explain that in a second. We're looking at something called DNA methylation. These are chemical tags on the genes that shift predictively with age and lifestyle. And they look at them across hundreds of thousands of sites on the genetic code and then run the pattern through an algorithm. And it's really, really important. So there are multiple different generations of this. It started with something called the first generation, which was Horvath, and then we went into the Grimm age, and then the Dunedin pace age, which measures the pace of aging right now. That's one that I want to talk about. And then we're going into more organ specific thing, like how fast is your liver aging, how fast is your heart aging, and so on. Again, the science is beyond the scope of this. Please come to one of our events or one of my lectures to get more information of this, or you can actually, if you're really interested in learning more about health and longevity and stuff, go to abovegeneticsvip.com, where we really lay this out. We have all kinds of teaching programs on there where you can learn more. Bottom line is that by looking at these things, I've done a really deep dive into this. It's very, very important. These clocks can give you a general sense to how fast you're aging per year. So if you're aging 1 year in a year, then that's normal. If you're slowing down that process, guess what? You're aging slower. If you're speeding it up, you're aging faster. And so I think measuring which of our genes are, turned on and turned off, and then looking at our aging clocks is very, very critical in having a baseline in how we can treat you. So I've become a very large proponent of epigenetic testing to give us a baseline to see what changes we can make, and then how that actual epigenetic testing changes 3 months later, 6 months later, et cetera. Right now, we are using something called Age Code by Genetic Lifespan. It is a fantastic marker of epigenetics and of the biological aging clock. It's like a mosquito bite to do the thing. We can send it to your home. Now we have a baseline that we can utilize to track your progress, but also we know where you are, because if we don't know where you are, we can't really treat you. And that's one of the biggest problems right now in modern medicine, is that quote unquote standard labs are not giving us a very broad look at where you are today, whereas epigenetic testing gives us a very broad picture of where you are and helps us to really structure a program for you. So on the other side of the break, we'll tie this all up. I know we went through a lot of different materials here on today's segment. This is AM 950 Radio, Recharging the Human Battery. We'll see you on the other side. Back on Recharging the Human Battery Radio. This is Dr. Sinicropibreaks. We are an AM 950 radio. We just finished talking about epigenetic testing and measuring. Okay, this is one thing that I really want to end, this concept of measuring where we are. It's a big talk. It's a big part of the talk that I give when I'm out here talking to entrepreneurs, business owners, the general public, and even when I'm talking to our colleagues at these longevity medicine conferences. We really need to have a good sense of where we are, and there's a great strategy to do it. And this is the way that I approach my patients, because what I realized over my 20-year career is that we were not measuring appropriately, and by not measuring appropriately, our plan was inadequate to really keep healthy, keep you healthy and well, and keep you out of our offices, out of having these crisis situations. And so we want to track the trends. I think epigenetic testing is fantastic for trend tracking and seeing what's turned on, what's turned off, what's happening with our biological clocks, without doing these big exaggerating things. Oh my God, I turned out, and I'm 15 years younger after, changing my diet. That's not really how it works, but we do want to trace kind of where the trend is. It's extremely helpful to help patients to really maximize their health. Now we want to pair it with other markers that really make a difference. We talk about these advanced lipoprotein tests like ApoB, which is much more valuable than an LDL cholesterol alone. A high sensitivity CRP, which is a marker of your inflammation. Again, your inflammation creates damage in the body, which then leads to chronic metabolic problems and chronic diseases. We want to look at things like, where's your fasting insulin? Okay, where's your VO2 max, your ability to process oxygen well? Almost no one gets a VO2 max. I always ask it, when I give these lectures. Strength, how much muscle do we have? That's a DEXA scan to look at how muscled we are, but we can also do grip strength testing. If you look at VO2 max, for example, the people in the top, if you compare the people in the top quintile with the people in the bottom quintile, so in other words, very, like very high level athletes versus people that are sedentary and don't do anything, there's a 500% difference in mortality. Folks, these are real numbers. This is why I'm so adamant about you learning about all these things we talk about, because it could potentially expand your life, save your life, and make you live a better life. This is really, really important. And then there's the things that are absolutely that we need to make differences. We have to get people off of smoking. We have to get their BMI levels. In other words, we have to reverse their obesity. We need to bring their glucose levels down. We need to improve their blood sugar. All of these, their blood pressure. But all of these things dramatically are going to speed up aging. So again, physical activity, healthy diets, medications as needed, supplementation as needed, biohacking as needed that we've talked about a lot. So there's just so many things that that we can do. So let's summarize it this way. There are a lot of things out here in health and wellness, and people are fired up on all sides of this debate, and everyone's just trying to sell you something or convince you of some idea. The truth is there's so much out here that's available in whether it's peptides or regenerative medicine or epigenetic testing, and even the longevity drugs coming down, but that's well further down the road. You guys have to stay informed if you really want to be the true CEOs of your own health. You need to be at the forefront. Please keep listening to this show. Please watch my podcast, Wellness at the Speed of Light, where we have experts from all over the world. Get the book, Wellness at the Speed of Light. Again, go to abovegeneticsvip.com, which will make a huge impact in your ability to get real information. And again, don't fall for some of these scams. Learn what's available, but also don't ignore what can make you healthier and well. And the only way to do that is by going through trusted resources and then finding providers that can help guide you on that journey. So on that note, as we always finish these things, go out there, you lead the best lives possible, be the CEOs of your own health, because you only have one life as far as we know. This is Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm Dr. Stefano Sinicropibreaks. We're on AM 950 Radio, and we'll see you on the next episode.